You know, I can't actually believe the nerve of these people, sometimes. So what they're saying here is they're wanting greater clarity for the interpretation of the Constitution, right? They're saying that it doesn't have enough clarification in it, like in the Bill of Rights, for the interpretation and the wording, right? Yet they're themselves lying. Also, at the same time as saying, "Oh, let's have more clarification here," they themselves are being extremely vague and self-confessedly don't want to talk about certain things because they say themselves that they are either taboo or they might end up in a straitjacket or grappling with it. They don't want to grapple with it. They're actually self-admitting that maybe it would be crazy to be blunt and honest about these things. Yet they're they're saying, "Oh, there's no clarification to it." So it's like they're it leaves you scratching your head with these people. Um, and one of the problems now, we've got a massive, huge police force, which is state of the art. Um, Very different to back in those days when you had to protect yourself, really. And a lot of the suits that were mainly being brought were private suits, civil suits, right? And people were getting like arresting MPs, right, over personal grievances, right? Now that no one gets arrested over civil suits, there's a different problem, and I think that problem is party political control over their MPs, right? Um, like Starmer, even if they don't vote Starmer's way, he will throw them out of his party. Then you've got the Conservatives versus the Tories, right? And then the minority parties like, Liberal Democrats. If you can deceive MPs, you see, not a lot of people read this material or are interested in this subject, right? Um, the general public aren't knowledgeable about it. So the only people who would read this material are either like students or academics or MPs. And I think it's a perfectly great way to con MPs, mislead young, new MPs in order to have power over them and also possibly threaten them. Like Dan Norris and Mike Amesbury, even if he did something wrong, everyone makes mistakes, but they've been elected. They've had their power invested in them by their electorate, their local area, not by the party. Okay, they stood for a party. This is Starmer. Starmer believe, "Oh, you'll never stand for this party again." Like, Labour didn't vote for him. The people voted for him. Now, they did vote for a Labour person. Well, that means that maybe Starmer doesn't even have the power to, pull them from the party. Is it his party? Or is it the party of the people who are members? And people are getting removed from parties when they haven't been convicted of a crime or offence, and should people know about it until it gets appears and listed in court? And people aren't being deprived of justice. It's just postponed. That's all. They're going to get justice. People might have to wait for justice if the police are really rubbish at investigating something like Madeleine McCann. Madeleine McCann took ages to investigate. Does those people deprived of justice or what? This is the thing. These people are they don't really have an all encompassing mind. You need to have broad thinking to include a lot of reasons and things, and they seem to be focusing on particular things and not fully understanding their place in the grand scheme of everything else. And a lot of it's procrastination. Much ado about nothing. Or much ado about something that's already been done about 100 times before. It's almost like masturbatrix or some masturbatrix or something. Procrastinatrix. It's basically like a case of procrastinatrix. And the clerks do these books, right? The clerks of Parliament do these books, but then they're actually never not elected, and they never were elected. and they only usually do these books after they've been like given an honour for serving in Parliament for service, but they themselves never voted any on any acts of law, right? And this is them almost like getting their revenge, really, doing these books. I actually now believe that the whole lies around privilege and the whole deception around it is actually about having power over MPs, parties having power over their own MPs, like whips, and their ability to have the police threaten and intimidate them and them being frightened, that something could happen. Because there's a lot at stake in their voting in Parliament. There's a lot at stake in the voting in Parliament so much that Starmer cannot handle it when they don't vote the way he wants to vote. It's very serious business. And then you got his brother. Something happening to his brother goes missing. There's a page on intimidation of petitioners in Erskine May. I'm having incidents happen, accidents, crashes opposite across the road, things happening to my mail and my post, going funny, all kinds of intimidation going on. It's not happening to just me, it's happening to other campaign leaders or people like, Kingsley Hamilton, Claire Dyer are having strange things happen to them. Like electric car flies opposite and the fire engine turning up and everybody witnessing it and getting scared. Boris Johnson's dad's next door neighbour, things like that. When Johnson's breaking the law with his newspaper column, in my opinion, and Rees Mogg and all this. There's a lot at stake. So it's a miracle our Mogg's not in prison at the moment. An absolute miracle. Yet other MPs are getting arrested. So it's to do with party political power, and also the police are a big stake in it now because they're wanting to get things voted through, like surveillance, facial recognition, all these things they're wanting to get voted through, like what Big Brother Watcher opposing. So it's actually it's control of MPs. They're taking their privileges away, and then they can like threaten and bully and scare them. That's why. So they can't be confident and fearless to act and represent in Parliament. But then again, a lot of them are, betraying their electors anyway in the name of political parties. So, the privileges are meant to be there. If you invested your power in a person, right, then they need to be able to do the job until the job's over, and then things can be sorted out. It's true that there's no such thing as complete and total protection from a prosecution of something that isn't to do with Parliament, business or work, right? But it's just a postponing of it. Parliamentary privilege is the postponing of it, or when they're doing things for the purposes of Parliament, which is totally different, like the police, that they're allowed to do certain things, not necessarily kicking doors through, but, with them, with their free speech and voice, and committees are meant to be able to seize and summon documents and persons and witnesses like courts. So, they've got functions, and that's what it's about, being able to perform functions in order to do the job. And it seems to me that the police are starting to take over all the jobs now. I've got a feeling that if we're not careful, we're going to end up with, like, the police chief as prime minister, and all the police, as MPs, who's going to, who's going to be in charge then,